Today's Take a Stand webinar for caregivers is going to be on senior citizens and mental health for May, which is Mental Health Awareness Month. Today we have Jay Jones, the community educator from Right at Home. I want to first thank Ms. Carlette Smith with Human Resource Options, who will be providing us with CEUs or continuing education units. Her email here is hro@humanresourceoptions.com. Some CEU housekeeping rules. All evaluations must be sent to humanresourceoptions.com. You can access that on their website just as you registered. Your information submitted should be listed as what is recorded at your licensing board. Home addresses and personal cell phones or home phone numbers, not your business address. And that's the same for phone numbers as well. Evaluations must be submitted within 24 hours of the class. No exceptions if they're not submitted within the time frame. No certificate will be provided to you. For those who are sharing a room to view the meeting, each person does need to register for the class, complete the class evaluation, and note in the chat box to the hostess of the meeting that they are in a group. All attendees to receive their CEUs. If you phone in, not through Zoom, please identify your phone number that you called from to cross-reference. Anyone who has not registered and their name or phone number is not on the Zoom report, you cannot receive a certificate. A little bit about the Alabama Aging Network. It operates in all 67 counties across the state of Alabama. The Middle Alabama Area Agency on Aging, also known as M4A, is one of the local 13 area agencies on aging. The overall mission is to age in place within the community. 90% of adults age 65 and older want to stay at home. And to the right, you can see a map of the different area agencies on aging across the state of Alabama. The Aging and Disability Resource Center, also known as ADRC, serves as a single entry point to long-term care services and support. It empowers people to make informed decisions about their long-term care supports and services through. You can call 1-800-AGE-LINE to be connected to your local AAA. Some of the services that we offer at M4A and other area agencies on aging are nutrition services, elderly nutrition program, caregiver support known as Alabama Cares, medication assistance known as Senior RX, insurance counseling known as SHIP, senior employment as called CSEP, legal assistance, elder law attorney, elder abuse prevention through the Elder Justice Center, long-term care support, Medicaid waiver, and ombudsman services. Lastly, before I turn it over to Mr. Jay Jones, we have our senior picnics coming up in the next couple of weeks, ending in June. You can find us at the Chilton County Senior Picnic on Friday. And here is the website to receive your CEUs, which I will put in the chat. Now I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Jay Jones to begin our CEU presentation.
Today's CEUs, we're going to be talking about to take a stand to increase your mental health, which is a very critical thing to do. Our objectives is to first understand what is meant by mental health so that we all have an understanding of the terms that we'll be using, because frequently we use terms that are defined by ourselves rather than defined by the speaker, and we come away with a little bit of a different meaning. We're going to talk about the multiple factors that influence mental health, and then we're going to do, it says 5 ways to increase mental health. That'll be your objective. However, I'll give you a whole bunch of ways that you can do that kind of thing if you'd like to pick and choose various things. So we're going to start out talking about Dorothea Dix. And she is kind of given the title of the individual who began the mental hygiene movement. And she was so successful in what she'd done that she won the support of federal government to set up over 30 state psychiatric hospitals. Remembering that before we had those in 1840 and before, we either hid people who had mental health issues, or we warehoused them. And in some countries here in the world today, we still do that. We still warehouse those individuals who have mental illness issues. And in other cases, we turn them out into the streets. And you'll see that many of the homeless folks that are living on the streets today are either veterans, or people with mental health issues, or a combination thereof. She led the way, but Dr. Isaac Ray came along as the fourth president of the American Psychiatric Association and further defined mental hygiene. And this is the one that we use today. The definition is the art of preserving the mind against all incidents and influences calculated to deteriorate its qualities, impair its energies, or derange its movements. That's a pretty inclusive kind of a definition of that. So that's the definition we'll be using as we go forth in our discussion today. So when you're talking about mental health, you're talking about something that encompasses emotional, psychological, and social well-being. And social well-being is going to be a key indicator in all of this as we go through, because all of this influences our cognition, our perception, our overall health, and our behavior. So mental health is just as critical. Good mental health is just as critical as good physical health, even to the point that when the Affordable Care Act came along in 2010, one of the things that it did was to reform the health insurance industry, and it mandated that whatever physical health benefits were provided, the same had to be provided under mental health as well. And this was the first time in our history in the United States that insurance companies were under a mandate to provide both levels of benefits. So if you had mental health issues, you had the same kind of benefits as if you were hospitalized for a physical issue. So all of the stuff that works to confuse our bodies and our brains and keep us kind of all turned inside out include things like bills and payments and the stress of work and the stress of late nights and all sorts of stuff. And what that does is that activates the cortisol in our bodies, and too much cortisol is a bad thing. So when you're talking about the fight or flight, a certain amount of cortisol is necessary in order for your body to be ready to react to whatever the stress may be. And stress is a good thing if it's done in moderation. Stress is what motivates us to meet deadlines or to get things done. Too much stress can have just the opposite effect and can actually shut us down totally, where we become, where we have the ability to actually get the job done. And what happens is the body gets too much cortisol at any given time. And so we have a hyperactive memory and attention, and hyperactive blood sugar increases that. It increases the blood pressure as well. And it does a whole lot of stuff to us. So the management of cortisol can be as effective as anything at providing benefits of good health. And it's something that that we can do by biofeedback, by learning how to breathe and how to manage that so that we get the rest and digest phase, which is kind of important for us to have as a balance as well. So all of this stress and all of this stuff in mental health determines how individuals handle and cope with all of that, the stress, including interpersonal relationships, decision-making, all of that kind of stuff. And so you can see that there's a tremendous amount of culpability in managing our mental health and being successful at what we do. It can shut us down totally and make us totally, well, it can make you unresponsive, but it can make you inactive. It can make you not as good as you would like to be at getting things done simply because you're overreacting because of those issues. So from the perspective of positive biology, or something's called holism, mental health may include the individual's ability to enjoy life and to create equilibrium. Equilibrium is very important. It gives us the ability to be psychologically resilient. You hear people say from time to time, don't take it personally. And one of the reasons why that motivates them to say that is by taking things personally, then we give our bodies a shot of cortisol so that we can be ready to respond the way we want to. Whereas if we receive it in a different manner where it doesn't affect us directly, we tend to be much more calm and cool about how things are, how we respond to. Let's see, I have something in, okay, that's chat room. All right. I was looking to the chat room. If you have any questions or concerns or comments, please throw them into the chat room so I can see them, and I'll be happy to stop and respond to them as best I can so that we can, there's what I was looking for. I don't know why that went away, but there it is. So I can respond to whatever questions you might have. So moving on. Cultural differences are important because cultural differences provide the framework from which we respond to psychological input as well as physiological input. And so depending on literally our zip code was kind of a compelling argument against a lot of the things that are happening in politics right now. But things like that, where people, the cultures tend to gather together, will have a predetermined kind of response, or at least an observable response that you can predict. And those include things like clan-oriented or adhocracy oriented, where you're looking for dynamic and entrepreneurial kinds of things, where people take risk, and the risk takers are seem to be a little bit more malleable when it comes to adverse consequences of the risk that they take. I have a friend of mine from my wonderful hometown of Little Rock, Arkansas, who went bankrupt 3 times before he was able to hit on an idea that made him very wealthy. If you talk about resiliency, I had said to my wife once before that he must be a really resilient kind of individual. And she said, well, forget him. Think about his wife, how resilient she must be if she's gone through multiple bankruptcies and saw all of her safety net kind of go away. Well, this guy went on to start TCBY Yogurt, which you guys know is all over the United States. They had a couple of nasty events that happened first, but they finally got to the point where they hit a home run and got what they want. That's a risk taker for you, and they're very comfortable doing that kind of thing. The other side of that are individuals who don't respond well to risk taking and look for predictability. And so you get those cultural differences that provide subjective assessments to give people the ability to have a different state of mental health with which they are comfortable because that's kind of their orientation. But we're all looking for a level of balance. It doesn't matter who you are or where you are. You're looking for a level of balance so that you don't overreact to input and stimulus that might be adverse. And so that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about some of the things that lead to that, and then how to achieve the balance or get back into a balanced state. So let's talk about abuse, which is largely in the eye of the beholder. But for most of us, once we see it, we know what it is. Now, some folks can interpret abuse from one way, and some can interpret it the other. That's why it's important to have a third party come in and take a look at it to determine what it is. But when a person feels and lives in an insecure environment, it creates a feeling of abuse. And that can come in verbal, physical, sexual, psychological, or even something that we're all familiar with, abandonment, where those that are supposed to protect you are not there protecting you. Social isolation. I'm sorry I'm doing that one as the second one that was in the list, because to me, that's one of the most critical. We have, I think there has been a significant amount of social isolation that occurred pre-pandemic, but we certainly know that there is a tremendous amount of that post-pandemic. And during the pandemic, one of the things that we found is that isolation was very effective at causing an increase in the number of deaths of individuals with dementia. Some 130,000 plus individuals died during a 1-year time period as a result of isolation, of the loss of their caregiver, of the loss of their care contact, of the loss of feeling as though they were in a very insecure environment. And I term that to be abuse, but it was done under the best pretexts, done primarily to protect them from getting COVID, but at the same time, it subjected them to something that was even worse. It's so bad that the Surgeon General just on Tuesday put out a report called The Epidemic of Loneliness and Isolation. And basically what he said in that is what I said, but they took a look at the increase or the physical consequences of having social isolation. And they know that it's very much akin to having a 2 packs of cigarette a day habit. 29% increase in heart disease, a 32% increase risk of stroke, and a 50% increase of developing dementia. Well, if you've got a 50% chance of getting dementia, take a look at what it does to people with dementia, because they don't understand why they can't be around their caregiver. And so isolation it is a serious issue with very quick, easy fixes that we'll talk about as we go through this. Now, it's important to understand that you can feel isolated even when you're in a group of people. And it's all about connectivity and how you connect with the people. And that's why things, very little simple things like smiling at people and acknowledging the person in front of you can be so incredibly important, because even for a moment, excuse me, even for a moment, it makes a connection. And that connection is important to the individual that has not had that connection. My firsthand experience with that is I sit here in my home office. I teach on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and I'm by myself Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And I get out and go to lunch so I can have a social connection, so I can have a conversation with another individual outside of my wife, of course, in order to maintain my mental health. And I do that with great purpose, going to various different places to eat. But I'm now recognized and welcomed in the serving staff, and I have conversations, and that's very helpful for an individual who is alone in a group of people, connecting. A 2022 paper from Johns Hopkins also found that the socially isolated older adults had a higher chance of developing dementia. So social connections matter for cognitive health, and the risk of social isolation is potentially modifiable for older adults. It's easy for us to make those changes. All we have to do is just put the last puzzle piece into place, and that is connecting these individuals with other individuals. And I caution you to think of social media as the way to do it, because social media lacks the ability to touch and to read the nuances of the face and those kinds of things. That's why you get into trouble so often when somebody sends you a text and you read it according to the script in your head rather than the script in their head. And it's very easy for you to misinterpret what the individual was saying or misconstrue what's being said. Common misperception is that our mind and body are two separate entities. They are not. The body can be regulated carefully through biofeedback. We know that because we can measure it, we can see it work. However, there's a direct relationship then, and it's proven that one can affect the other. Mental health issues can create family crisis, and up to and including divorce. But in the meantime, before you reach the point of divorce, you're talking about a lot of chaos within the family itself, and it disrupts the normal function. So you seek good mental health within the family. Poor mental health can lead to substance abuse, where the individual uses alcohol or drug as either a treatment mechanism, which is really kind of a coping mechanism. It's one of those things they do so I don't have to deal with it. Went walking down the street one day and was accosted by an individual with Tourette's, that was obviously homeless, shouting abusive kinds of things at people. I'm a softie, so I went into my pocket and I handed the individual some money because they were panhandling. And my wife said to me as we walked away, that's one of the things that attracted her to me was my willingness to do something like that, where other people could say things like, well, he's just going to go spend it on alcohol. Well, if I lived on the streets, I'd have to drink too. I mean, it's just kind of the bottom line. Can't imagine anybody having to live on the streets in the first place and how that would be. But if I did, I'd have to have some kind of coping mechanism that would enable me to be able to do just that kind of thing. Discrimination is another one of those things that contributes to poor health or mental health. It's the outward manifestation of not being fair or being evaluated or being accepted for whatever the reason may be. It could be the color of your hair, the nose ring that you're carrying, the color of your skin, your religious beliefs, whatever that discrimination is. It creates an atmosphere that's not optimal for good mental health for the individuals. And you know, I've witnessed several encounters of police officers who have stopped and harassed basically people of color just simply because they are people of color. And it's hard to feel comfortable, hard to feel like you're in an environment that is safe for you when even the police are coming after you simply because you look different than maybe somebody else. And if you take a look at the statistics for who gets jailed, people of color are 6 times more likely to be incarcerated than people that are white folks, shall I say. Money and unemployment, or employment as the case may be, contribute to mental health as well. The loss of a business or being fired. If you've ever been fired, it's a terrible feeling. And frequently it's not about you or the quality of work that you've actually done, but it's more about the individual that's letting you go and their opinion of the quality of work that you've done or the contribution that you're making. We work in the state of Alabama. The state of Alabama is a right to work state, which basically says they can fire you, an employer can fire you for any reason, period, paragraph, color of your hair, what time you got to work, what you eat for lunch. They don't have to give you a reason. They can just fire you whenever they want to. And that creates an atmosphere of instability that causes you not to be able to have the optimal mental health when you are facing something or feeling as though your termination is about to happen very quickly. And sometimes the threat is not real, it's perceived. And other times it is real, and it's because you're reading the tea leaves correctly. Another thing that influences our mental health is genetics, of course. There are individuals who have genetic predispositions toward issues that will affect their level of mental health. And we're talking about various and sundry things like schizophrenia and those kinds of things. We still don't know what causes it. We don't know what causes Alzheimer's, what the symptoms look like, but we don't know what causes it. We don't know what causes any of the dementias. We do know what causes some of these kinds of things. We don't have effective treatments for them. So having good mental health is a bit of a challenge in our day and time. So Samantha Dutton, who is a friend from Tennessee, she was the past president of the National Association of Social Workers in Tennessee, a wonderful person, has a great book that she's done, and she points out that mental health is as pervasive as it is elusive. And so it's important that you make a conscious effort to check in with yourself on your mental health. And if there are issues, that you seek some kind of remediation of those issues, or at least addressing those things so you can get back to good health. If you have an infection, you go to a physician that can write an order for an antibiotic if your body is not doing a good job of fighting it. And if you're not doing a good job of handling whatever the situation is, reaching out and having somebody help you work through those situations is a wonderful thing. The other thing she points out is that we've made a mistake over the last couple of years of mixing up the two words sad and depressed. Depression is constant, and it is a diagnosis. It is something that can be, with the right tools, diagnosed in an individual, whether it's endogenous or exogenous. But sadness is transient. So sadness kind of sneaks up on us because, well, we've lost a loved one. We have bad grades. We've had a bad day. And it permeates the stuff that we do to the point that we're sad during the day. It looks a little bit like depression, but it's not the same as depression, in that depression is a step further where the sadness never really leaves. It stays there. Now, you can mask it. Many people do. You worry more about the person who masks their depression because they're at a higher risk for suicide than you do with people who express their depression and demonstrate the depression, because you can have more empathy and deal with them. So what do? Well, there are core strategies that we can use to manage stress and anxiety in order to get back to a balanced equilibrium, so that we're feeling good about ourselves and we're able to do and function the way we're supposed to. So attention centering techniques. And this is that stuff that I was talking about, that's biofeedback, which we know works because we can now measure much of that stuff. So to neutralize anxiety and also stress, you can use things like meditation, like deep breathing exercises, like visualization. I go to my happy place, which happens to be at the beach, and I can actually hear when I get to my happy place and I really make a concerted effort, I can hear the waves breaking, and that provides a tremendous amount of relaxation for me. The second thing is using expressive creative strategies. My wife is really adept at what she calls praying in color. And what she does is she uses her art background, takes out a drawing pad, and using coloring pencils, she will begin to actively combine meditation, which is much like prayer, with visualization, where she begins to draw something and it takes shape as the prayer takes shape, sometimes including an individual's name, sometimes just a thought. But it helps her deal with the stress and the anxiety that comes with understanding what's coming up maybe in the future. Physical movement, and you're not going to hear me use the word exercise until we get to the end. You always hear exercise, but there, in my mind, is a difference between physical movement and being active and exercising. And I think it's too easy for us to just say, you need to exercise. And that turns a lot of people off because, quite frankly, I don't look good in those outfits that you put on, that people go to the gym in. I need most of my body covered in something so it's not revealed. And so I don't like to say that a walk that I'm taking is really exercise, although it counts as that. It's more physical movement, but it helps you deal with that. Reflection, exploration strategies, things like journaling are very helpful. Journaling can do a great deal at helping you spot trends. And it could be that the stress and anxiety that you're dealing with occurs on a predictable cycle, so that you can, once you start the journaling, you can begin to see a pattern in that behavior and can do some preemptive work so that you interrupt the pattern from continuing itself. Certainly communication, and here I'm talking about not just sitting at the table and having a conversation with a best friend over a glass of wine. That tends to be quite useful for a lot of people. But even seeking the counsel of a trained professional who is skilled at helping you understand what these feelings are and how they're affecting you, and then what kind of steps that you might take to counter those so that they no longer become an issue, and figure into that. And then nutrition, relationships, and exercise kind of fit the core strategies here with healthy lifestyle values. And we'll talk more of those as we finish up this thing in the next 20 minutes or so. So, as I said, regular physical movement, it's not just exercise. And again, the bias against exercise is that we all have to have a cute little outfit, or we have to have the right shoes, or we have to have something in order to pre-qualify us for exercising, or we have to go to a Max Fitness or a place like that. And you don't have to do that. Just chair exercises, which you see a tremendous amount being done in assisted living and independent living places, are just as valuable, because when you begin the movement releases endorphins, and endorphins create positive associations and also calm you. And so it's important that all of that take place. And so a sedentary lifestyle of just sitting and watching TV, watching the soaps, or watching the evening movies, or whatever it is that you watch, it is good relaxation from time to time, but you got to get up and move. And it doesn't have to be a whole lot of movement. It can be just going for a walk, which, by the way, tends to be the best treatment for dementia, according to all of the studies that have been done that come back and show some kind of long-term effect of doing something. That and programs are very good with those, as they engage the individual in a creative response rather than having them just do an activity. So I'll toss that out for whatever it might be worth. Eating well and eating regularly is important. I know so many people live in areas where there are food deserts. And so instead of going to the Publix and picking fresh fruit and salads and those kinds of things, they end up going to the Dollar General and they get cans of prepared foods that are very high in sodium and other things. And they tend to not be very healthy for the individual. And then you end up with weight gain and other physical problems. So instead of giving up sugar, which, some people say, first thing you got to do is get off all sugar. Well, I wouldn't agree with that. Some people need to do that, apparently. But modulation or moderation is, I think, the key to success, to successful eating well. And so that's adding things sometimes to your menu that you wouldn't normally do, like considering a salad or two for your weekly lunch rotation, rather than a bag of chips and some cheese dip, or a bowl of something that's high in carbohydrates, macaroni and cheese, things like that. Which, by the way, only in the South is macaroni and cheese considered to be a vegetable. I don't know how we did that, but that is a coup. Anyway, rest is important. And rest comes, successful rest comes from establishing a routine that includes sleep and diet and exercise, all of those things together. So if you're having heartburn when you go to bed, or if you've eaten something that's very spicy, that's kind of challenging your digestion, you're not going to sleep well. And some of you have heard me say in the past that I have a theory, and my theory has to do it has to do with the cause of both Alzheimer's and Lewy body, which both of those have to do with the deposit and the buildup of plaques and tangles in the brain. And until 2012, we didn't realize, that's 2012. That's just like 12 years ago. We didn't realize that we had a mechanism in our brain that essentially is a limbic system. We used to think that the blood-brain barrier was inviolate, and it turns out that it's not. It turns out that when we go to sleep at night, and especially when we get into our REM sleep, our glia cells will shrink as much as 60%. And in doing so, they allowed a flush of cerebral spinal fluid to flush the toxins out of our brains on a daily basis. And so if that is not working properly, it allows for the buildup of the waste products in our brains. And I have a hunch, and somebody talk me out of it, tell me why I'm wrong, but I have a hunch that the faulty limbic system somewhere along the line may be responsible for the buildup of the trash in our brains, which turns out to be the plaques and tangles. And I use as my example somebody that eats scrambled eggs on a plate and takes those scrambled eggs when they get finished and sticks it into the dishwasher and turns the dishwasher on several hours later. You then extract that plate from the dishwasher and it still has eggs remaining, residue remaining on the plate. And I'm just wondering, again, somebody please talk me out of this. I'm just wondering if that is not the reason why we have the buildup of plaques and tangles. If that's the case, that makes rest even more critical to mental health because it keeps our brains clear of the trash that needs to be flushed out every night. My 2 cents worth. Doing things like practicing gratitude and providing forgiveness to individuals is very important. Expressing gratitude is really easy to do, but we find it difficult. Some people find it so easy to do that they are nonstop doing that. And we all know who those people are because we enjoy being around them. You know, hey, I owe you one, or I am really grateful for what you've done, or that was so kind of you, or even thank you kinds of things. And so practicing gratitude, it doesn't have to be all the time, but doing it every once in a while not only feels good to the person receiving the gratitude, but it makes you feel good to say something nice to someone to make them feel good. And so being able to share that with them is another one of those things that we can do to achieve good mental health. It's just by sharing a happy thought. I appreciate what you've done for me. I am grateful. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. These things are little in stature, but big in result in my mind. Get social and be social. This is very, very important. As I said earlier, we learned from COVID and the lockdowns that we had. The lack of socialness has taken its toll with a great many people. We know the increased death toll among individuals with dementia, because that's something that we could measure, and it was very odd to occur, and that's why they draw a direct causal relationship. But take an individual who is, 95% of us want to live at home. We heard that at the very beginning, and that is true. But 95% of us are actually going to die in a hospital, which is unfortunate because we still haven't built enough resources and infrastructure to be able to retain people at home, although we're really doing a great job of addressing that and going toward that. But being social gives us the ability then to practice some of these gratitude things and to sit down with somebody in a restaurant and have that salad that we were talking about earlier. It gives us the ability to connect. And it's the connectiveness that I think is critical to the social piece. So yes, you can be connected by social networks. I take great pleasure in being on Facebook, and I know that's now an old person's platform, or at least that's what I hear. I take great pleasure in staying up with all of my high school friends and knowing what's going on in my hometown of Little Rock. I know some of you may recall they just had a tornado there, and that tornado kind of went through the neighborhood that I grew up in as a child. It literally went right over my sister's house, pulling all the trees up and out of her yard, not blowing them over, but pulling them up and depositing them, pulling them right out of the ground. So she must have been right over this thing right over the top of them. Then it went on across the river to Burns Park and did a tremendous amount of damage there. And so the social media that I use gives me the ability to reach back to these individuals and do a wellness check, if you will. Hey, are you okay? Did you make it through? Is anybody hurt? Tell me about the damage at your house. And it gives me the sense of being connected to the people that I grew up with, spent 35 years in Arkansas. And so I still have some strong relationships there and care about those people. So that makes a difference. But what's missing is the connectedness. And so coming up here in just a very short period of time, June, late part of June, we're having our 55th high school reunion. Yeah, I'm that old. And that is where that connectedness takes place. It's where we get to touch, we get to feel, we get to hear, we get to laugh with, we get to interact with individuals. And that is probably one of the best highs that you can get in terms of feeling good about things around you. And I love this picture of these ladies laughing. Y'all would be laughing too if that was me drawing something, because I can't draw a straight line. I can draw flies, but that's about it. But getting social and being social are very, very major components. I believe strongly in senior centers that give people the opportunity to travel from their home during the daytime and be there, have lunch with everybody else, play cards, just sit and talk, play bingo games, whatever the case may be. All of that connectedness is so incredibly good for our mental health. So there are 10 ways that you can look after your mental health. These are things that you can do that don't really cost a lot. They're just efforts that you can take either on behalf of somebody, take them to the senior center, or just simple things you can do. Number one is talk about your feelings. And these are in no particular order. I'm just kind of calling them out in the order that they're listed here. Talk about your feelings. That's important. Women, y'all are so much better about it than men do. Many men don't even recognize what those feelings are. We have a very shallow litany of words that we go to when we're talking about feelings. And God bless y'all, you have the ability to dig deeper than we do and give name to some of the feelings that we have. So that is very helpful. Keep active. Again, I'm not saying exercise, although activity is exercise. Walking your dogs, just going for a walk by yourself, just going out in the yard and digging in the yard, planting stuff or pulling weeds or whatever you'd like to do. Eat well. That's a challenge for a lot of people because of food deserts or because of finances, where the quality of the food that they choose is not what we would typically recommend for healthy eating. And there you can help somebody by bringing them fresh fruit, bringing them vegetables and things like that. This is a great time of year to be doing stuff like this because there's a lot of fruit stands and vegetable stands and places like that that can help. Take a break. Breaks are very important for us to have the ability to put ourselves into neutral for a short period of time. I do that here when I'm creating the continuing education programs that I do, where I'll work maybe like crazy. I'll work 45 minutes, just hard at it, just total focus. And then I need to take a 15-minute break. And sometimes it's just a matter of jumping onto Facebook and seeing what's going on there, or take a look at the news, or I get up and I go in the kitchen and fix something. But taking a break takes you away from that stress, and it breaks it into smaller pieces and makes it work easier. Drink sensibly, and I'm not even going to try to define that. I don't think anybody can define that, and I think there's a tremendous amount of guilt that is associated with it. So sensible is what might be considered sensible to you. I know there's some health guidelines out there, and if there's a question as to whether you're not drinking sensibly, then the one above is the right one to do. Next is to talk to somebody about those feelings and have them do a liquor check for you, if you will. How do you handle it, and how's it affecting you, and are you being sensible about it? Keep in touch, as I said, staying in touch with old friends. I have a lot of old friends who have simply become acquaintances now. Some of them are at a depth at which once I reactivate the contact, we almost pick up where we left off. And we read each other's kind of minds. We're right back in sync with each other. But a lot of people, that's not the case. You You get in touch with them later on, and you realize that whatever that chemistry was back then is gone now. And so you're cordial, but it's not quite the same. Do something you're good at, which is really kind of important, because if you even if you're not good at it and you're working on becoming good at it. So I have been practicing playing the guitar now since I was about 18 years old. And I'm still the same quality guitar player I was back when I started, I think, because I don't practice as much as I should. But there are times when it sits next to me right here, right now. I can pick it up and start playing some things that I enjoy playing. And you should do the same kind of thing. Accept who you are. The older we get, the easier that is, because we realize that we had maybe very high expectations for ourselves without the appropriate foundations to get there. What you've done is what you've done. The past is the past. The present is what's happening right now. And the future is a gift to yourself as to who you are and what you do for that. Ask for help if you're struggling. And that's very important, because many people don't ask for help. Unfortunately, most of us guys are John Wayne-like, and we suffer slings and arrows without sharing that kind of information. And it gets so bad to us that it begins to affect our behavior, because we don't talk about our feelings. We don't ask for help. We don't recognize when we have slipped, even temporarily, underwater, thinking it's okay because I can pull myself back up. And one of the best ways to pull yourself back up is to care for other people. One of the foundations, I think, in longevity for a lot of folks is knowing that they have contributed to the welfare of other people, even if it's something very slight, and something that's transient and not ongoing. But caring for other people certainly is a love language. And for some folks, it is their main love language. But for others, it's an acceptable love language that works both ways. So when I get to care for other people, I feel good about myself, and I feel good that I've been able to do things for other people. So those are 10 things that you can do. This looks like about the last one. The last thing I'm going to talk to you about is random acts of kindness. And I love doing those kinds of things. It doesn't have to be in the Starbucks, because most people that pull into Starbucks can afford the $6 cup of coffee they're about to buy. But other places, like when you pull into the McDonald's line, look at the car behind you, and paying it forward gives you kind of one of those warm, fuzzy feelings. I find myself, when I do that, trying to get out of the parking lot and down the street before the other car gets up to the window and discovers it. So they can't even identify who it was that did that random act of kindness for them. And I do that from time to time, but I don't do much fast food buying anymore, so I don't have those kinds of opportunities. But I do other things, and I'm sure all of you do, that you may not recognize. Things like calling someone you haven't spoken to in a while, just contacting with them and saying, "Hey, how you doing? I was thinking about you, and wondered, what was going on," or make a cup of tea or a cup of coffee or a cocktail or something of that nature for someone you live with. I have, and this is one of those special things that I like to do, but I have for the 13 years that Catherine and I have been married, I used to make her coffee, but she stopped drinking coffee, now just does tea. So I bring her tea to her every morning as she's getting ready. And I enjoy doing things like that. And I think you would enjoy that, doing it with the person that you care the most about. Offer support to vulnerable neighbors. If you see somebody that lives close to you, especially people who are elderly seniors that may not have visits or contact with family members, offering to include them in activities, offering to help them. Think of the lady that lives next door to you, who cuts her yard, who fixes the little things in her house when they go wrong, who hangs her pictures, who does those things. If she's doing them by herself or they're not getting done, then maybe you can offer to help out. donating to a charity in either time, talent, or treasure makes you feel being able to help out in those kinds of ways, being part of a food kitchen, being part of a respite care program, being a volunteer at the senior center, those kinds of things where you donate your time to others to help others. And again, to tell someone how much you appreciate them by making a very positive statement really goes a long way. And so I want to say to you guys, I appreciate you sitting through all of this and listening to me drone on for the last hour. This has been a lot of fun, both in preparing this and delivering it to you. I hope you have learned something and you have enjoyed this. If you would like to have a copy of this presentation, I will be happy to send you a PDF copy. If you will send an email to jay.jones@rahceu.com. And for those of you who are also on the line, I do a program called Tuesdays and Thursdays with Jay. You can go to www.rahceu.com for a list of the courses that we're offering during the month of May. They're free, they're via Zoom, and they're at lunchtime. So thank you so much for this opportunity, and I'll turn it back over to our moderator.